Sunspire Academy stood as the most prestigious military school in the Orion sector, a place where the best and brightest of the galaxy's species trained to become warriors, strategists, and leaders. It was a place where honor was earned through discipline, intelligence, and strength. Yet, on this particular day, a ripple of unease moved through the crowd of alien cadets gathered in the Grand Training Hall. A murmur spread like wildfire as the announcement was made 2 humans had been accepted into the program. For many, it was an absurdity. Humans were a new species in the galactic community, barely beyond their own planet, their technology primitive compared to the great empires of the stars. They were short-lived, fragile, and reckless. What possible reason could the Academy have for bringing Deathworlders into their ranks? The doors slid open, and 2 figures stepped in. They weren't towering beasts or terrifying monsters. No exoskeletons, no bio-enhanced limbs, no glowing eyes of psychic power. Just 2 ordinary-looking humanoids in standard-issue cadet uniforms. 1 male, 1 female. Ethan Carter and Mira Vasquez. Their expressions were unreadable as their gazes swept across the room filled with taller, stronger, more biologically advanced beings. They were towering XLR warriors with armored plates covering their bodies, Seraphis strategists with elongated heads and calculating crystalline eyes, and reptilian Dreth soldiers whose razor-sharp claws could tear through steel. By comparison, the humans seemed unimpressive, and that fact only fueled the whispers of disbelief and amusement among the gathered cadets. A Dreth cadet, taller than Ethan by at least 2 feet, sneered and muttered something to his companion. The translator drones caught it instantly, broadcasting the words across the room. Soft bodies. Their bones snapped like twigs. Why are they here? A few chuckles followed, but the humans remained silent. They neither reacted nor acknowledged the insult. Instead, they stood still, waiting as the head instructor, Commander Isarin, stepped forward. He was a veteran of countless wars, a being whose very presence commanded respect. His 4 yellow eyes scanned the crowd before settling on the humans, lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Then he spoke, his deep voice resonating in the hall. "You doubt their place here," Saren said, addressing the cadets. "I see it in your expressions. But you are here to learn. And if you believe you already know everything, you are fools." His gaze swept over the room, silencing the murmurs. These 2 are the first of their kind to step foot in this academy. If they survive, they will not be the last. There was something unsettling in his words, something many of the aliens did not understand. If they survive, why would he phrase it like that? The training was difficult, yes, but it was not deadly. The humans exchanged a brief glance, but still they remained silent. The first test of the day was the gravity trial, a standard introduction to determine a cadet's ability to endure different planetary conditions. The artificial gravity fluctuated between 1 and 10 times a species' homeworld standard. Most recruits struggled at level 5. Only the strongest could handle level 8. Anything beyond that was considered impossible for biological bodies to endure. The humans, being from a moderate gravity world, were expected to collapse long before reaching the upper limits. The test began, and at level 3, a few cadets from lower gravity planets began to show signs of strain. At level 5, some dropped out, gasping as their bodies refused to continue. Level 6 saw even the stronger species beginning to struggle. But the humans? They stood firm, unmoving. Their breathing remained steady. By level 7, even the Dreth and Exalari were beginning to falter, their muscles locking under the crushing weight. Ethan clenched his fists, his face tightening, but he did not waver. Mira's legs trembled slightly, but she held her stance. Level 8 was activated, and a dozen cadets collapsed instantly, groaning in pain. Yet, the humans remained standing. The Dreth who had mocked them earlier let out a pained growl before dropping to one knee. The test had to be stopped before reaching level 9, not because of the humans, but because every other species had failed. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. The humans, despite being labeled weak and fragile, had outlasted nearly everyone. Ethan exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders, while Mira wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, looking unimpressed. The aliens stared. How was this possible? Their bones should have cracked, their bodies should have buckled under the pressure. But they stood, breathing heavily but very much conscious. It wasn't just endurance. It was something else, something the aliens couldn't quite understand. A refusal to fall. The combat trial followed soon after. It was a simple sparring exercise, meant to test agility, reaction speed, and physical resilience. Ethan was paired against an auxiliary cadet twice his size, with hardened armor-like skin. The match began, and within seconds, the auxiliary launched forward, intending to overpower him instantly. But Ethan wasn't there. He moved quick as a shadow, dodging strikes, rolling under attacks, finding openings where there should have been none. He didn't rely on brute strength. He didn't fight fair. He fought to win. Mira, meanwhile, faced a Seraphis, a species known for their speed and intelligence. Her opponent attempted to predict her movements, using advanced calculations to determine the best attack angles. But Mira was unpredictable. She adapted, changed tactics mid-motion, feinted when least expected. Within moments, she had disarmed her opponent and ended the match with a swift strike to the chest. The watching cadets could no longer deny what they had seen. Humans, though lacking in superior biology, possessed something terrifying. As the training session ended, whispers filled the air. The skepticism had not disappeared, but now there was something new in the voices of the aliens. Uncertainty. The humans had proven themselves far from weak. And in the days to come, as the trials grew harsher, the other cadets would begin to understand. They were not ready for what humans truly were. The first real test of Sunspire Academy had begun, and the cadets knew this was where weakness would be exposed. The introductory assessments were nothing more than a warm-up, a way to measure basic endurance and skill, but now came the real challenge. The trial of endurance was infamous among recruits. It was designed to push bodies beyond their limits, to separate those who merely wanted to be warriors from those who were born for it. It was not just about strength or intelligence, it was about willpower. The alien cadets, trained on their own worlds in combat and survival, had prepared for this. But no one had prepared for the humans. The trial was simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Each cadet was fitted with a vest that measured their physical condition. They had to run across a shifting landscape filled with obstacles, endure high gravity in certain zones, navigate electrified barriers, and cross a freezing river all without stopping. If their vitals dropped too low, the vest would deactivate them, signaling failure. There was no time limit. You either finished or you failed. The race began with the shrill sound of the starting siren, and the cadets surged forward, their competitive spirits ignited. The first segment was easy, a sprint across solid ground. The faster species, like the Seraphis, and the avian, like Y. Curie, took the lead immediately, their bodies built for speed. The humans, despite their muscular structure, did not start off leading the pack, but they were not falling behind either. The first real challenge appeared in the form of the gravity field's pockets of land, where the gravity shifted unpredictably, sometimes doubling, sometimes tripling. The Exilari warriors struggled but pushed through, relying on their dense frames to endure. The insectoid Kryn moved awkwardly, their thin limbs not designed for such weight. The Seraphis slowed, their bodies unused to such conditions. And then the humans arrived. Ethan Carter hit the first gravity shift, and his body tensed, muscles straining against the sudden force. His steps became heavier, his breathing deeper, but he kept moving. Mira Vasquez, a step behind him, gritted her teeth as she adjusted her pace, her boots slamming against the dirt, refusing to stop. Pain was not a reason to stop. A Dreth cadet, one of the largest species present, let out a frustrated growl as his legs buckled under the pressure, forcing him to drop to one knee. His breath was ragged, but before he could push himself up, Ethan passed him. For a moment, the Dreth expected mockery, maybe a sneer, or a victorious smirk. Instead, Ethan simply nodded at him, as if to say, "Get up. Keep going." And then he was gone. Something about that gesture unsettled the Dreth, but he clenched his jaw and forced himself forward. By the time they reached the next challenge, the electrified barriers, exhaustion had already begun creeping into the weaker cadet. The Seraphis, despite their intelligence, hesitated, calculating the safest path instead of moving forward. The Exilari charged without strategy, hoping brute force would carry them through, only to be shocked into retreat. The Kryn hesitated, their exoskeletons unable to handle the surges of electricity. But Mira and Ethan barely slowed. They adapted. Ethan dove into a roll beneath the first arc of energy, using the momentum to carry him forward. Mira watched for the pattern, then timed her movements perfectly, slipping between gaps with precision. Where others hesitated, humans acted. The next challenge was the frozen river, and here, things became truly painful. The water was not just cold. It was near-death temperatures, designed to test how long a cadet could push through hypothermia before their body shut down. The avian species, unable to handle the cold, collapsed almost instantly, their bodies rejecting the environment. The reptilian species slowed, their metabolism struggling. The Exilari and Dreth fared better, their bulk providing some insulation. But even they suffered. Ethan and Mira stepped into the water, and immediately, their bodies reacted. The cold stabbed through them like needles, numbing their limbs within seconds. Their breath came in gasps, but neither hesitated. Mira forced herself forward, her legs moving despite the growing stiffness, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ethan's body screamed at him to stop, to get out, to find warmth. But humans had evolved on a death world, where survival meant fighting through pain, where their ancestors had once walked through ice storms with nothing but instinct and willpower to keep them alive. So they kept going. By the time they reached the final stage, the climb of exhaustion, half the cadets had been eliminated. The final task was simple: climb a vertical wall while carrying an extra weight equal to half their body mass. But after everything they had endured, this was where true limits were exposed. The first climbers moved, struggling as their muscles screamed in protest. Many fell. Some collapsed before they even began. The Dreth, powerful but drained, roared in frustration as his grip failed. The Seraphis, usually tactical and precise, couldn't think their way out of this. Ethan grabbed the rope and pulled. Every part of his body protested, but he ignored it. Mira followed, her breath ragged but steady. One pull at a time, 1 inch at a time. Other cadets watched, waiting for them to slow, to fail. But they didn't. Step by step, grip by grip, they kept moving. The other species had superior bodies, but the humans had something else. Something no one understood yet. By the time they reached the top, only 4 cadets had completed the trial. Ethan, Mira, a Dreth, Exilari. The rest had either collapsed, failed, or been pulled out by their deactivated vests. The humans stood at the top, shivering, muscles shaking, but still standing. Still breathing. Still ready for more. The instructor, Commander Saren, watched them with an expression the other cadets could not decipher. Not surprise. Not admiration. Recognition. As Ethan and Mira sat on the cold ground, catching their breath. A Seraphis cadet stared at them, eyes narrowed. How? He finally asked. How do you keep going? Ethan exhaled, staring up at the alien sky. He could have explained human biology, their evolutionary history, their stubbornness. But instead, he just gave a tired smile. We don't stop. The trial of endurance was over. But for the rest of the academy, one thing had become terrifyingly clear. Humans did not know how to quit. The cadets of Sunspire Academy had seen many things in their training, but nothing prepared them for what they were about to witness. The humans had already proved they could endure pain, push through exhaustion, and keep moving when others had fallen. But endurance was one thing. Survival was another. The trial of mortality was one of the most brutal tests in the academy, designed to simulate real battlefield conditions. Every cadet would be thrown into an unpredictable war zone, facing simulated injuries, hostile environments, and impossible odds. The goal was simple: survive. The trial was not just about strength or skill. It was about understanding what it meant to stand on the brink of death and keep fighting. The cadets were transported to an artificial battlefield, A vast desert filled with ruined structures, hidden traps, and combat drones programmed to hunt them down. Each cadet was given a limited supply of rations and medical kits. The challenge lasted 48 hours, and the rules were clear. There were no rules. You had to survive by any means necessary. The trial began, and within minutes, the battlefield erupted into chaos. Explosions shook the ground as drones fired energy rounds at fleeing cadets. The sky darkened as sandstorms swept across the terrain, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Some cadets grouped together using their numbers to increase their chances. Others went alone, relying on stealth and speed. But as the hours passed, something became clear: the humans were different. Ethan Carter and Mira Vasquez didn't seek shelter like the others. They didn't hide or avoid danger. They moved towards it. While other cadets ran from the combat drones, the humans attacked. Ethan moved fast, dodging plasma fire, weaving between debris, and closing the distance before the drone could react. With a precise strike, he slammed his combat knife into the drone's central processor, shutting it down instantly. Mira did the same, using the environment to her advantage, setting traps, leading drones into tight spaces where their mobility was limited. The aliens watching the trial through live feeds couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans were not just surviving. They were hunting. By the 12th hour, casualties had risen. Many cadets had been eliminated, some by drones, others by exhaustion or injuries. But the humans? They'd been shot, cut, burned, and still they kept going. Ethan's arm had been grazed by a plasma round, the burn severe, yet he wrapped it tightly and moved on as if nothing had happened. Mira had taken a deep cut to her leg, but instead of stopping, she cauterized the wound with heated metal, gritting her teeth against the pain, refusing to slow down. The watching commanders were stunned. Most species would be incapacitated from such injuries, their bodies shutting down in response to pain and trauma. But the humans acted as if pain was just an inconvenience. By the 20th hour, the battlefield had changed. The weaker cadets had been eliminated, leaving only the strongest. The Exilari, with their armored bodies, still stood. The Dreth, using their sheer power, fought on. The Seraphis, using intelligence and strategy, adapted. But the humans? They were thriving. Ethan and Mira had stopped running. They had stopped hiding. They were fighting back. They moved together, covering each other's blind spots, setting traps, ambushing drones, and even stealing resources from fallen cadets. Where others were just trying to survive, the humans were treating the trial like war. By the 40th hour, only 5 cadets remained: Ethan, Mira, a Xelari, a Dreth, and a Seraphis. The battlefield was nearly silent now, only the distant hum of drones patrolling the ruins. The remaining cadets had gathered in the same area, each aware that the final stretch would determine who was truly the strongest. They watched the humans carefully, uncertain whether to see them as allies or threats. And then the final test began. The hunt. A new wave of drones was released, faster, deadlier, equipped with real weapons instead of stun rounds. The simulation was over. This was war. The Dreth roared, charging forward, tearing apart drones with his raw strength, but for every one he destroyed, another replaced it. The Seraphis used his intelligence, calculating movements, dodging attacks, using cover. The Exilari held his ground, tanking damage with his armored skin, relying on endurance. But the humans? They adapted. Ethan didn't fight the drones head-on, he led them into an ambush. Mira didn't run, she climbed, using the ruins to attack from above. They were relentless, refusing to stop, refusing to fall. Even when they should have. Ethan took a hit to the side, blood soaking his uniform, but he kept moving. Mira's shoulder was dislocated from an impact, but she forced it back into place and continued fighting. The watching commanders exchanged uneasy glances. The aliens had superior physiology, superior technology, superior evolution. And yet, these humans, these short-lived fragile creatures, were still standing. The battle raged on until the final moments. The Exilari collapsed, his body finally failing him. The Seraphis, unable to predict the humans' unpredictable tactics, was overwhelmed. The Dreth, mighty and powerful, fell to his knees, his strength spent. But the humans? They refused to die. When the final siren rang, signaling the end of the trial, only two figures remained standing. Ethan, breathing heavily but still on his feet. Mira, bleeding but still holding her weapon. The battlefield was littered with the fallen, but the humans had survived. The other cadets, even those who had once mocked them, now stared with something they had never expected to feel fear. As the medics rushed in, Commander Exerin stood watching from above, his expression unreadable. His officers spoke in hushed voices, struggling to understand what they had just seen. "They should have fallen," one of them muttered. "They should have died." Saren's four yellow eyes narrowed as he observed the humans. They should have. But they didn't. Because humans, despite their short lives and fragile bodies, had something no one else in the galaxy understood. They were unkillable. The halls of Sunspire Academy were filled with hushed whispers. The results of the trial of mortality had shaken the entire institution. The aliens had expected the Exilari to dominate, the Dreth to overpower, the Seraphis to outthink. But none of them had won. Instead, the ones left standing at the end were the humans, those short-lived, fragile creatures from a death world. The other cadets looked at Ethan Carter and Mira Vasquez with something they had never felt before. It was no longer amusement or curiosity. It was fear. No one understood it. How had they kept moving when their bodies should have shut down? How had they fought through injuries that would have incapacitated any other species? How had they survived without rest, without hesitation, without surrender? The questions spread like wildfire, whispered in the dormitories, murmured in the training grounds, spoken in low voices in the mess halls. And soon, curiosity turned into obsession. The alien cadets wanted answers. It was the Exilari who made the first move. Jorek, a towering figure with armor-like skin, cornered Ethan in the training hall. "You should have fallen," he said, his deep voice vibrating through the air. "I saw your wounds. You bled. You should have died." His four crimson eyes narrowed. "What is your secret, human?" Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow and looked up at the alien, unimpressed. "Secret?" he repeated, rolling his shoulders. "There's no secret, Jorek." Jorek growled in frustration. "Lies. No species can endure what you did." He stepped closer, his heavy footsteps making the ground tremble. "Tell me, Carter, what makes your kind so unkillable?" Ethan smirked, shaking his head. "You wouldn't believe me even if I told you." That only made the rumors worse. The Seraphis cadets, the most intelligent and analytical of the academy, began studying the humans more closely. They monitored their heart rates, their reaction times, their diet, their sleep patterns. They examined their biological data, cross-referencing it with hundreds of known species. But the numbers didn't make sense. Humans were weaker than the Dreth, slower than the Seraphis, less durable than the Solari, less agile than the Waikiri. Yet they had won. The question was why? The Seraphis scholar, Valen, confronted Mira one evening in the Academy's library, his silver eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made most beings uncomfortable. "Humans are a paradox," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Your bodies are not the strongest. Your speed is not the greatest. Your endurance is remarkable, but even that does not explain everything." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp with curiosity. "What is your advantage?" Mira closed her book and looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You really want to know?" she asked. Valen nodded. She exhaled slowly, tilting her head. "Pain." The Seraphis blinked. "Pain?" Mira's lips curled into a humorless smile. "We don't stop because of pain. We keep moving through it." She leaned in slightly, her voice quieter, more serious. "Most species avoid pain. They retreat from it, let it control them. But humans? We accept it. We expect it. Pain isn't the enemy, it's just part of the fight." Valen frowned, processing her words. "That is illogical." Mira chuckled. "Maybe to you." The next day, the Dreth tried to test this theory. In their culture, strength was everything. Resilience was a sign of dominance. And so, one of them challenged Ethan to a combat trial, a one-on-one duel with no weapons, no armor, only raw endurance. The Academy's cadets gathered around the sparring ring as Ethan and the Dreth, Korak, squared off. Korak was massive, his dark scales thick like armor, his muscles dense with power. He had crushed boulders with his fists, torn through enemies in battle simulations. A single hit from him could break bones. Yet Ethan stood before him, unarmed and unimpressed. The duel began. Korak struck first, his powerful fist slamming into Ethan's ribs with a force that would have shattered most beings. The crowd gasped, but Ethan didn't fall. He staggered, sure, but his feet stayed planted. He took a deep breath, shook his head, and smiled. He smiled. Korak's eyes widened. No one smiled after being hit by a Dreth. Ethan moved next. He wasn't as strong, wasn't as fast, but he was smart. He dodged, he adapted, he attacked at angles the Dreth didn't expect. Korak landed more hits, powerful, crushing blows, but Ethan kept standing. His lip was split, his ribs ached, his knuckles were bleeding, but his eyes burned with something terrifying. Determination. His strikes slowed. His breath grew heavier. But Ethan, he was still moving. Step by step, strike by strike, he was still fighting. And when Korak finally collapsed to one knee, exhausted, the realization spread through the watching crowd like wildfire. The humans don't stop. The humans don't break. Silence filled the air as Ethan stood over his defeated opponent, breathing hard but still standing. Korak looked up at him, not with anger, not with humiliation, but with understanding. He finally saw the truth. That night, the whispers turned into legends. The humans don't fear pain. The humans don't surrender. The humans don't die. In the highest chambers of Sunspire Academy, the instructors and commanders reviewed the trial footage. They had trained soldiers from across the galaxy, seen the finest warriors of every species. But the humans were something else. Commander Xarin watched the recordings in silence. Finally, one of his officers spoke. "What do we do about them?" Saren's eyes remained fixed on the screen, watching as Ethan and Mira helped their fallen opponents to their feet, offering water, offering camaraderie. He exhaled slowly. "We watch," he said. "And we learn." Because for the first time in the history of Sunspire Academy, they had encountered something truly unstoppable. The galaxy had long feared the powerful. But now, they had something new to fear. The Death Worlders. The rumor spread far beyond Sunspire Academy. Across the galaxy, whispers of the unkillable humans reached the ears of warlords, strategists, and scholars. At first, many dismissed the stories as exaggerations. No species could endure what the humans had. No warriors could push past their own limits the way they did. No soldiers could keep fighting even after they should have fallen. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. The trial recordings, the combat simulations, the survival tests, humans excelled at them all, not because they were the strongest, the fastest, or the most advanced, but because they refused to lose. The alien cadets at the Academy began to look at Ethan Carter and Mira Vasquez differently. No longer were they just competitors. They were something else. Something terrifying. The auxiliary cadets, known for their physical resilience, now hesitated before sparring with humans. The Dreth, once certain of their superiority, watched them with wary respect. Even the Seraphis, the most intelligent and logical of the species, struggled to understand the humans' greatest weapon, their willpower. One night, in the depths of the Academy's training facility, a secret test was conducted. The Academy's high-ranking officers wanted to know the truth. Were the humans truly unbreakable? A simulation chamber was prepared, one that was designed to break even the strongest warriors. It was a perfect replication of a war zone, collapsing buildings, relentless combat drones, deadly environmental hazards. The test had only one objective: last as long as possible. Most cadets barely survived an hour in the simulation. The best warriors of the Academy had lasted 2. The record was held by a Dreth commander. Ethan was bleeding. Even when Mira's leg was broken, they kept moving. The officers had no choice but to shut down the simulation manually. Otherwise, they feared the humans would keep going until their bodies completely failed. The Academy commanders met in secret. "This is unnatural," one of them muttered. "No species should be capable of this." Another commander, an older XLR with deep scars across his armored skin, shook his head. "It's not unnatural," he corrected. "It's terrifying." The fear of humans only grew when the combat drills began. At Sunspire Academy, cadets trained in live battle scenarios, real weapons, real injuries, real stakes. And this was where humans became legends. In a large-scale team battle, multiple species were divided into opposing squads. The objective was simple: eliminate the other team, using strategy, teamwork, and raw combat skill. Ethan and Mira's squad was outnumbered from the start. They had weaker allies, fewer supplies, and worse terrain. The enemy had a Dreth Berserker, a XLR Warborn, and a Seraphis tactician, some of the best warriors in the Academy. The battle should have been over in minutes. Instead, it became a massacre. Mira moved like a ghost through the battlefield, setting traps, using the environment, striking from the shadows. She fought without hesitation, taking down enemies twice her size with nothing but pure skill and precision. Ethan? He was a force of nature. He took hits that would have dropped anyone else, pushed through wounds that should have ended the fight. And he kept fighting. When his weapon ran out of ammunition, he used his hands. When his body was battered, he adapted. When he was outnumbered, he became more dangerous. The opposing team panicked. They had the advantage. They had the superior forces. But they couldn't kill the humans. The Dreth charged at Ethan, slamming into him with bone-crushing force. Ethan should have gone down. He didn't. He wiped the blood from his mouth, grinned, and kept coming. The XLR, using their brutal strength, cornered Mira. She should have surrendered. She didn't. She lunged at them, dodging and weaving, using their own size against them. By the end of the battle, only two figures remained standing. Ethan and Mira. The watching cadets didn't cheer. They didn't even move. They only stared. Because what they had just witnessed was not normal. It was not natural. It was inhuman. That night, the Academy halls were filled with silence. Cadets from every species avoided the humans. Some still whispered about them, but now, the whispers were laced with something new. Dread.it wasn't just their endurance. It wasn't just their strength. It was their mindset. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't just seek victory. They embraced battle. They treated pain as a challenge. They didn't care about the odds, about how outmatched they were. They fought because it was in their nature to fight. And this, more than anything else, was why they were feared. In the highest chambers of the Academy, the commanders reviewed the battle footage. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Commander Asaran leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "We train the best warriors in the galaxy," he said, "but we have never trained anything like them." He exhaled slowly. "They are different, and that difference makes them dangerous." One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. "What do we do about them?" Saren's four yellow eyes flickered toward the screen, where the human stood, bruised, bloodied, victorious. He shook his head. "We watch. We learn. And we pray that they never turn against us." Because now, the galaxy understood one undeniable truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were the monster's other essence.